Hello, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Ro2R Review. Welcome back, and today I want to discuss third-party ports on the Nintendo Switch. So really quickly here at the beginning of this video, I do want to take one last opportunity for a while to remind you guys of the Dark Souls Remastered for Nintendo Switch giveaway I am doing because of course I have these two lovely copies of the game, and of course make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We're trying to hit 10,500. We are getting ever closer, and then also make sure that you're following me on Twitter as well. And once we hit 10,500, I will be doing the giveaway and announcing the winner. So like I said, I'm gonna take a break from starting every video with a call out to the contest for now. So yeah, that's it. Them's the details. If you're curious about winning, make sure you're subscribed and follow me on Twitter. So like I said, we're discussing third-party ports on the Nintendo Switch, and coincidentally, Dark Souls Remastered happens to be one of the games that sort of is wrapped up in this conversation a little bit. It's actually the game that's currently sparked this debate that's kind of happening right now and why I wanted to discuss it with you guys. And naturally, you're even watching some footage, of course, of that exact game running on the Nintendo Switch right now throughout this video. So go ahead and kind of soak that in and consider this as we discuss this whole third-party port situation on the Nintendo Switch. So, third-party ports on the Nintendo Switch, a lot going on here. Of course, ever since the Switch launched, we've slowly seen more and more third-party support start to arrive on the Switch. And of course, it's been really great. I think most Nintendo fans or Switch fans have probably been really happy, or at least more happy than they have been in recent years with the amount of support that we've been seeing. And I might even actually change that from the amount of support to the quality of support. I think that that's the difference here. I mean, the way Bethesda has really stepped up giving us some of their biggest and best games has been fantastic. Of course, we are seeing things like Dark Souls Remastered. We've seen Wolfenstein 2. We've seen Doom, Skyrim, and we know that Doom Eternal is coming. We saw LA Noire, plenty of indie games, talks about things like possibly Grand Theft Auto or whatnot showing up in the future. It's been great because some pretty high-profile third-party games, typically the more mature kind of stuff, has actually been having a lot of success on the Switch. And it's been a while since we could say we've seen that so consistently on a Nintendo platform. So that has a lot of people talking and a lot of people excited about the Switch. However, this year, and more recently in particular, we've seen a little bit of a controversy around the quality of these ports, and whether or not what we're seeing arrive on the Nintendo Switch actually justifies these games coming over, if they're living up to their reputation, if they're living up to the demand of quality that any gamer of any platform would demand of that respective platform, and are they living up to what the Switch can really do? Now, there are quite a few examples of games that have kind of showcased this, where, you know, it might be one of the titles that's released on all three platforms, or maybe the Switch as well as something else like the PS4 or what have you. Basically a multi-platform release that's also launched on the Switch, and there's been some examples where that Switch version, the Switch port, really hasn't been doing the game justice, and struggles a little bit more with its performance, and its output, and its visuals, and its frame rate. And maybe even sometimes the amount of content thrown into the game, or if you have to download half of the content, it's not actually included on the game cartridge itself. I mean, a lot of these things have been happening more and more. Recently, like I said, as in this year 2018, there are two pretty big examples that seem to be showcasing this as a potential problem, and that is Dark Souls Remastered, which of course you're watching footage of and I'm doing the giveaway for, so take that what you will, and then Wolfenstein 2, which I mentioned earlier. These are two games that I think kind of showcase a little bit of what's going on when we look at some of the third-party ports that we've been seeing on the Nintendo Switch. Now, let me get a couple of things out right out of the gate before I get any deeper into this. One, I think Wolfenstein 2, the game actually to me is only just okay. I do think that the overall quality of the port is fine. I think the game runs well, it controls and plays, I think, the way it's meant to. I feel like the struggles I have with controlling that game have more to do with how the game was designed across all platforms, and literally nothing to do with it being specifically on the Switch. So I do have to say that part when it comes to Wolfenstein 2. There are performance issues that we're going to talk about as well. And then, like I said, with Dark Souls Remastered, we are going to have to talk about that a little bit as well. But I'm going to just put it out to you guys right here and now. I am a Dark Souls maniac, and I am loving Dark Souls Remastered on the Nintendo Switch. Yes, there are going to be some issues with how the game was ported we're going to have to talk about, but make no mistake, the game is fantastic. It's Dark Souls just like you want Dark Souls to be. I think overall it looks really great. They did get a couple of better things out of the Nintendo Switch hardware, like better resolution and frame rate, and so that part is awesome. And the game is just a blast because it's Dark Souls, and I like that crazy challenge, so it's a great game. But the quality of some of the issues with the port, of course, is what we need to talk about, and the larger issue of how that relates to just porting games to the Switch in general. So like I said, there are some other games besides these two that have showcased this. Rime is one that actually jumps to my mind from last year as well. But when we look at these two games, when we look at Wolfenstein 2, for example, like I said, the game runs pretty much fantastically. I think it controls and plays totally fine. But there definitely are performance issues when it comes to the resolution. Oh my goodness, that game, you can tell they really slacked on the quality of the output. I mean, it's almost like they had to, like they couldn't get the game to look as sharp or as clear as it needed to. You can tell how dynamic it is because when you play that game and you go into different environments and there's different amounts of enemies on screen, or, you know, so many different, maybe a huge boss monster mech thing that you're fighting, you can visually see with your eye, and I say this as somebody who never notices this stuff, you can visually see that game get blurrier right in front of you. I mean, it's almost instant, and it's like, holy smokes, you feel like you gotta squint to kind of look at it. I mean, it's still technically impressive, and it is still a good-looking game. I mean, I can look past the initial sort of facade of like, oh, the resolution is this, the game is this sharp here, and less sharp here, and I can still be like, well, it doesn't mean it's not a good-looking game, whatever the case may be. But if you want to look at it compared to its competition, compared to the other consoles, you can see the dip in quality. And obviously the Switch is not far less, is a bit less capable than the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, obviously much less than the PC. So that's going to be part of the reason, but there could also be a case to be made on why do you have to make it suffer so much? I mean, we've seen examples of exactly how capable the Nintendo Switch hardware is from Nintendo and even from some other developers. So it sometimes makes you wonder, why was it so hard? What was the deal or the issue with getting the game to maintain a more stable resolution that looks a little bit more modern and current and competitive with the other platforms? When it comes to Dark Souls Remastered, oh boy, there's a lot going on. A lot of people have been talking about this, and there's some question as to whether or not this is even truly Dark Souls Remastered, the Nintendo Switch version of the PS4 and Xbox One game that came back out in May. You know, basically the game that was first told to us and promised to us as a Nintendo Switch title before even the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Digital Foundry did a breakdown. Plenty of other YouTubers have discussed this. Many of these YouTubers, some of them friends of mine, they know the technical stuff way better than you guys know that I do. But what seems to be happening is this might not be the Dark Souls Remastered. It's actually possibly just a port of the Xbox 360 original game, which launched in 2011, I want to say. So like 6-7 years ago. Apparently, it's just a 360 game. It's not the newer, updated, remastered version that released on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The visuals and some of the other content and stuff within the game apparently have clued people into that. And, you know, whether or not that's true, I can't say 100% from my own playthrough, other than I can say I'm just loving the game and it's fantastic, and I think it looks completely fine for what it is. But apparently on the Switch, the only thing they were really able to do is improve the frame rate in most areas. And also, like I said, the resolution apparently is a tiny bit better. It's like 720 or higher, depending on docked or handheld, I guess. And so that's the one thing it's doing better than the 360 version. But apparently, even the 360 version of the game had some better models and textures and polygons in some areas. And it's like, okay, well, if there's any truth to that, it's a little disappointing. It's definitely kind of shocking because we know the Nintendo Switch is far more capable than the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3. I mean, it should be far more capable. And so if there's truth to that, it's kind of disappointing. And so when we look at things like, you know, what may or may not be happening with Dark Souls, what may or may not be happening with Wolfenstein, which all props to Panic Button, by the way. Those guys are doing a great job no matter what here. So this isn't a call out to them. And, you know, games like Rime and other games that have had these kind of suffers as well. Like the WWE 2K game from last year apparently was horrible. It's like, why is this happening? What is the deal where specifically with the Nintendo Switch, we're seeing this stuff happen? And is it a really big issue? I mean, first we have to address the most obvious thing we're looking at here. And I already mentioned this, and it's the fact that we all know, as much as we may love the Switch, hey, it's not as technically advanced or capable as the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, or the PC. That's just a fact. It's not in the same league overall in terms of hardware and capabilities. So that right out of the gate is obviously going to hinder some experiences, some things you may see included in a game or a port, and it may even hinder whether or not some games even release on the console. As I've talked about, that's why we're not getting games right now like Call of Duty or Red Dead Redemption 2. So that is obviously a very important and clear fact that we have to go over here. It's just not as capable, sure. However, I feel like the Switch is also more capable than some of these worst examples of ports have shown us. And that to me is the kind of curious case and the issue that I'm seeing. My only assumption here that I can make is somebody who, again, I always have to repeat this to you guys, somebody who is not tech savvy, is not aware of all the inner workings and the components and the GPUs and CPUs. It's not my bag, it's not my angle, so I'm doing my best to talk about it as somebody without huge knowledge of that topic. But what I feel like is probably happening is, one is that the console is underpowered. The other is that the architecture for the Switch is clearly far different from the Xbox and the PlayStation. And on top of that, it seems like porting games to the Switch might just be really hard. And some of these companies, like the company behind Dark Souls Remastered, maybe they just really weren't the best guys for the job. Maybe they didn't really have it in them to do what some of the other better port companies have been doing to get games to run optimally and properly on the Nintendo Switch hardware. And so then you start to wonder, does that mean that Nintendo made a good decision or a bad decision to make the Switch the way it was? I would say overall they still made a good decision because I love what it is, and it's amazing to even get a game like Wolfenstein 2, despite the resolution, or Doom, or Skyrim and whatnot running on that console. To have it running so well portably is impressive. And whether Dark Souls is a 360 version or a downgraded remaster, whatever that game truly is, when I play that game in portable, it does look great, it runs great, and it's still fun as hell. I still have an actual console Dark Souls experience, or Wolfenstein or whatever, in my hand. And that can't be understated. Obviously, Nintendo's games are always going to be mind-blowing. They've been working magic on their own hardware for decades. It's a great, wonderful thing. You can always trust them to really showcase what their hardware can do. But when it comes to companies that aren't Nintendo, we've seen evidence of them struggling in the past, but we're really seeing evidence with some of these examples I've talked about today, where they're struggling more with the Switch than they have with other hardware in the past. I do think it's a shame because I enjoy third-party content. I enjoy multiplats. I enjoy a lot of these other companies that make games for all the consoles, and I want them on my Nintendo console. I want them on my Switch. And so that's kind of why I see this as a shame and a little bit of a disappointment that we're seeing a situation where apparently it's just really weird and awkward to develop for the Switch, and I guess a lot of companies don't really have what it takes to make it happen properly. I will say, again, I touched on this for a minute. I know I called out Wolfenstein a little bit, but it has to be noted that overall, I mean, come on, Panic Button are the true MVPs of the Nintendo Switch right now. They're doing amazing things. They're bringing over great games to the Switch, games that we want and enjoy playing on our Switch. These are games that are very graphically intensive, very, very huge experiences, the kind of things that we might not have even believed were possible on the Switch until Panic Button stepped in to make it happen. So they obviously struggled a little bit with Wolfenstein, but that doesn't mean it's not impressive that they got the game in such a great playable fashion on the console outright. And we also know that they're bringing Warframe pretty soon as well, so, you know, the jury's out on that one because we haven't played it. But with any luck, that turns out to be a quality port that also plays and runs well. Apparently, recent reports have said that the work they've done just in porting the Switch version over to the Switch has kind of had this retroactively positive effect of kind of upgrading and making better the other versions. And I don't really know how that's even possible. It was a story I saw floating around a couple of days ago. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know how that happens, but it's definitely not a bad thing. So hopefully that means that the Switch version is going to turn out to be really fantastic, and it'll not be one of these examples of a company struggling to make a third-party game run properly on the Switch. So I don't know. These are kind of my thoughts on the conversation that's happening right now. Like I said, a lot of people are talking about Dark Souls specifically. All I can say is, I think it's great. I'm really loving it. I think it looks fine. It plays really well. It would be nice maybe if I knew it was the exact same remastered version that the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One got. Apparently, according to Digital Foundry, that's not the case, and yeah, that's a bummer. But at least I'm enjoying the game as a super huge Dark Souls fan. You know, when it comes to these other games like Rime and Wolfenstein 2 and whatnot, I guess it is what it is, and maybe the Switch is always going to be that weird hardware that's hard to develop for, hard to port for, and we're just going to have to kind of see how it all continues to play out. I mean, I believe we're going to get more third-party support next year. I think next year is going to be like the floodgates are going to open for some of the biggest third-party support. We really need to see companies like Activision and EA really step in, really dedicate. You know, I mean, Ubisoft has been doing a good job, 2K has been doing a good job, Bethesda, of course, Rockstar. But what about these other companies? I think that that's going to happen next year. So the question will be, can they justify their ports on the Switch, or is the Switch going to prove too much of a beast for them to do a quality job on? It'll be interesting to see. So what do you guys think about this topic, this controversy, this idea, third-party companies porting games over to the Switch? Is it just that these companies aren't good enough to make it happen, or is it the Switch's hardware being weird that's more the culprit? Whatever you think, please discuss it below. That is it for me. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R, and I'll catch you next time on another video.